The first use case you think about blockchain is payments, right? So that's the first thing you want to do, is show that you can secure a payment mechanism just like Visa, MasterCard, but much more secure, without middlemen, take away the fees, offers economies of scale, so the more people use it, the cheaper it gets. The way we view the future of value in the long term, 3 to 5 to 10 years, we view layer 1 blockchains will essentially become like the new republics. These will be the new mechanisms where all the value is going to proliferate to. In the future, there'll be the layer 1 blockchain, there will be the mining market, there'll be the dApps, and there'll be tokens. So the lower you get in the stack, the lower risk you have, but the lower rewards. The highest risk reward will be on the layer 1 blockchain, because that's where all the value will flow up. But it's highest value, highest risk. We view layer 1 blockchains, which is Bitcoin, Syscoin, Ethereum, as court systems. They need to be combative to the external forces that we don't control, even in the software world. In the real world, like inflation, hyperinflation, wars, these systems need to be secure from that. And this is why we view Bitcoin as the gold standard for security and decentralization. What else does the world need? What else does the world cherish when you have something like Bitcoin? How can we extend that to something else where we can take advantage to build real world utility? This is where Ethereum comes in. For me, Ethereum is a gold standard for flexibility or general computation. We're trying to stick to the gold standards we know the world's going to cherish and develop on, and we put those two concepts together. And this is what Syscoin is.
What's up, people? We back. In case you're not familiar, I am
that Hotep Jesus dude.
Shout out to my sponsor, Syscoin, the best of Bitcoin, the best of Ethereum, boasting some of the fastest transaction speeds in the world using merge mining technology. Ethereum smart contracts, bundling those transactions before we even hit the layer 1. Shout out to Syscoin. If you want to build on one of the greatest blockchain technologies in the world, go to hotepjesus.com/Syscoin or hit the Syscoin logo on hotepjesus.com. Fill out the form, and somebody will get back to you shortly. They are incentivized to do so. Once again, it's hotepjesus.com/Syscoin. Today, I have a wonderful guest who I had the pleasure of meeting, I believe it was last year at Thaddeus Russell's event. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Horton. Scott Horton is the official foreign policy advisor to Hotep Nation. What up, Scott? How you feeling, bro? Wait, I can't. Hold on. I can't hear you.
That was my fault. I forgot to hit the button again.
Hey,
man, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm good. Let's hop right into this thing. I got you about an hour today. Let's hop right into this. Elon Musk has taken over Twitter, and he has reinstated some people, including Kathy Griffin, but he has not reinstated Alex Jones. I know you're a proponent of free speech. I'm not sure if he's saying no, Alex Jones will not be considered next, but do you think Alex Jones should be replatformed?
Well, I don't know what his supposed violation was, if there was one. I think what happened was the Silicon Valley leaders all met on a weekend lawn party and just decided, let's yeet him off of every platform all at once, which is pretty bad. So, look, I mean, I think unless people are guilty of, I don't know exactly what the terms of service are, but explicit threats of violence or, some kind of thing like that is one thing. But I think pretty much anything else should be allowed. And that's the Supreme Court standard for government censorship, is a direct incitement to violence, like leading a mob. Come on, guys, let's go burn his house down. That's not protected speech, right? Now, I think that guy's house should get burnt down. That is, right? It's not a direct incitement to violence. It's protected. And so, that's, to me, essentially should be the standard for all these social media platforms and the internet and everything else too,
What about what they call hate speech? For example, some people have blamed me for the 500% increase in the N-word following Elon's takeover. Do you think that the platform should allow the N-word to be used on the platform?
Well, I mean, first of all, on that stat, that I think they credibly argued that that was a trolling operation, that was a bunch of bots that were set just so that they could have that headline that, oh, look, the giant increase in the use of that word and whatever. But
well, I did
I
give out N-word passes that night, so
oh, that's good. That's nice.
I sort of helped that, but
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mean, look, as you know, with that word, context is everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how's a computer algorithm supposed to know what you meant by that? So like at the same time, like I think there's probably people who don't want to spend their day being called that online and would like, you know, for people crossing that line to, I don't know. I just hit the mute button on somebody I don't like. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, no, I think my thing is direct incitement to violence or bust. You know what I mean? Like that's it. This is America, man. We got to be able to argue about everything. I mean, there's a time, think about like how absolutely outrageous is the accusation that rape of young boys by priests in America is or even around the world is a widespread phenomenon that needs to be tackled, this or that. In 1988, that was a crazy conspiracy theory that only some kook would ever talk about, right? And what ended up happening was people did real journalism and said, no, man, there's a real problem here and a real system of cover-ups, a real system of incentives, preventing people from talking, preventing newspaper editors from going there, right? Until somebody had the courage to go ahead and dive into the thing. And that doesn't mean they got everything right or whatever. Who knows? I'm sure they got some innocent guys caught up in the dragnet, but it was something that was just kind of everybody knew it, but only kooks talk about it. Nobody else is willing to get into that kind of subject matter. And then it turned out that no, that was a serious thing. And I mean, that's just one example, but there's a million of them where it takes free speech among the masses of people, among the rabble, or among, you know, journalists who have the courage to get into it, to be able to write things that are wrong. That's the whole purpose of free speech in the first place. I mean, you can argue it's a natural right, but in terms of like the civil politics of the founders of this country, there was a purpose behind it. It was that, look, we're not founding this thing on the basis of the powerful can be trusted. They can't. And so it's one of the checks and balances against power in our country, you know?
Is free, if you're shadow banned, for example, Elon today basically said, you know, certain types of speech will just be throttled. Mm-hmm. Is that still free speech if you're basically singing to yourself in the shower?
No, well, I mean, look, I mean, there's a couple different things here, right? Like, so if you're talking about, I mean, we don't really know what it means that now that Elon is in charge, right? Like we knew before Elon Musk, I don't know the guy, before we knew that the politicians had come to Twitter, to Facebook and the rest and said, you better fall in line with the kind of censorship that we would like to see before we make you. And previously to that, I think Glenn Greenwald has done a great job of explaining this. But previous to that, Facebook and Twitter and Google, they didn't want to take sides. They didn't want to tweak anybody's algorithm up or down or whatever, because they just didn't want to get in the middle of that and have to be subject of those kinds of demands. So they were just saying, like the phone company, hey, we're just providing a platform. You guys talk about whatever you want, and that kind of thing. And it was political power that made them stop. And now I actually did an interview with Judge Napolitano today, and he explained that, and Greenwald's written about this, that the courts have ruled, you know, decades ago, whether on this matter, you know, on other things, unrelated, but same difference, that the government cannot compel a private entity to violate your rights in a way that the government is bound from doing, right? They can't, you know, hire a private detective to search your house,
right,
to build their criminal case, for example, right? Something like that. Or they can't, in this case, they can't tell Facebook to censor you because they don't have the right to censor you. But see, what they did was they didn't pass a law. They just kind of leaned on Facebook and said, boy, it would suck if you guys got audited. And boy, it would suck if we found other things about you that we wanted to regulate that would cost you money, right? Like going after it, you know, in a way, trying to get around the law, to do an end run around the law and that kind of thing. Now, as far as just shadow banning and all that. Oh, wait. So I'm sorry to finish at that point. So now that Elon Musk has taken over the thing, like how many of the FBI, CIA, and DHS agents did he fire? Is that who he fired? Was all the cops and spies that were riddling through Twitter? And then, like, what is his priority? And let's get real about Elon Musk. Like, he is the owner of SpaceX, which is completely dependent on military contracts, right? His Tesla company, I don't know about now, but at least in the beginning for its first many years, was completely dependent on a giant national government rebate kickback to anybody who bought a Tesla, right? In order to make it profitable. Otherwise, they would have been so expensive, he wouldn't have been able to sell them. And so this is a guy who, like all billionaires, is connected with the state. There's no real free market billionaire. Hell, even if you were one, they'd figure out how to regulate your ass to the point that you had to hire a lobbyist and embed yourself with state power in order to protect your fortune. You know, like once you have that much money, you're essentially owned. So, which is funny, right? Because you'd think it would buy you all the freedom in the world, but it's sort of like that thing. If I owe you $1 million, I'm screwed. But if I owe you $1 billion, you're screwed. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's sort of a take on that. But anyway, so now back to the shadow banning thing. Like, if you believe in essentially like the spirit of Twitter being independent from that state pressure, whether it's official pressure or whether it's unofficial pressure for them to censor, then look, if you are in violation of the terms of service, then buy. Otherwise, and they should be reasonable ones, but otherwise, then no. I mean, this shadow banning thing is ridiculous. And like, I hate to whine about it. It's just happens to be one that I know about. Was like, I put my URL in the shadow banning machines a couple of times, and they said, you know, like the testers, they said I wasn't shadow banned. But I can tell you it's a fact that someone at Twitter had set a button somewhere where my follower count was hard limited at 63,000 starting at the very end of May. And what happened was, it was after Uvalde. I had said something horrible about the Uvalde cops and what they should do to each other or what should happen to them or something like that. And that got me kicked off for like 12 hours. And when I came back, I could never get another follower, basically. Like, I did a couple of times where I was like whining and going, man, they're persecuting me and where's all my followers and whatever. And so those like got a ton of retweets, and I would get like 200 or 300 in a day, and then the number would go back down again. And then I would see it all summer long for 5 months straight, all summer long. Every single day, my count would go up, and then my count would go back down, and the count would go up, and the count would go back down. And it literally stayed at 63,000. And this is just right on the heels of I was one of the leaders of the Libertarian Party takeover. I put a brand new book out, Hotter Than the Sun. I'm doing the Kennedy Nation show on Fox News every other week. And like, nope, I'm hard limited. I got no coverage whatsoever. And then as soon as they were gone and Musk took over, people started tweeting to me and saying, hey, you're back in my timeline. Where you been, Horton? I missed you. Right. So they were shadow banning me. They were, you know, it had gone down. And we know that they did this with Google before, years ago. And remember, too, and everybody should remember this, it was the Russiagate hoax. It was 10,000 lies, one big lie disguised as 10,000 little lies that said that Donald Trump, first of all, that Russia rigged the election of 2016 and that they rigged it for Donald Trump and that he colluded with them on all that. That was a completely fake. All of it was fake. A damn lie from beginning to end. He was entrapped by the Democrats, set up by the Democrats, and then the FBI counterintelligence division and CIA pretended to carry on believing there was something to investigate here and whatever, in order, when the investigation itself was the conspiracy against him, was to just make it look like he must have done something. And they carried it on for years and years and years. But it was under the excuse of that. Russian disinformation. Anytime anybody disagrees with the party line, those are Russian talking points. That's the Russian click farm that tricked you into saying that. And so based on that, first of all, they algorithm the hell out of, especially a lot of Trumpians on Twitter, like the kind of the alt-light, they called them. A lot of the guys that kind of like Milo Yiannopoulos and those guys who had kind of grown up as, made their fame as Trump boosters, kind of right around that time, all, you know, got busted down. And then they did it on Google too, the Google search results, which that was like the gold standard for finding what the hell you're looking for in the world. And then all of a sudden the thing might as well be run out of Langley. And, you know, it really was found with In-Q-Tel money in the first place. Like, you can't really ever trust it, but it used to work. I think everyone recognized it. Google used to work a hell of a lot better than it does now. And like antiwar.com, man, we got 10 million pages of content going back to 1995 with all the best keywords in the world. Like, if we were just going by basic search engine optimization, we're at the peak. And we were. Before they started dialing us down, whatever you search for, antiwar.com comes up because we covered it all, you know, and then they turned us down. And what happened was they started doing it to the right wingers first. And then to make it fair in Congress, they went and they started doing it to a bunch of left wingers too. So that was the World Socialists and Truth Out and Truth Dig. And then they threw in antiwar.com with them, I guess. And they turned all of us down right at the same time. And it just absolutely cost us. And there's a bunch of different sites. And honestly, it was the World Socialist website. That's a Trotskyite sect. They actually did the best journalism on this at the time. They were one of the group that was getting persecuted, and they could just see in their stats that their referrals from Google just went crash, you know? And like, look, if you wanted to learn about Trotsky, you type in Leon Trotsky. Well, yeah, you want to get the World Socialist website. That's their sect. That's who they are. And like, nope, they're on page 3, you know, this kind of thing. So they did that to them, and they did that to all of us. You know, and antiwar.com, we're libertarians, but I guess in their mind, they were like, well, whatever. We have to balance out our persecution of right wingers by persecuting some left wingers and some libertarians and some other people too. And then that was years ago. That was in 2017, right? Or even the end of 2016, and just at the beginning of the Russiagate hoax. And then they've been doing it on Twitter and Facebook and everything else too. Remember a few years ago, they talked about on Facebook, they had done a test to see whether they could make you upset. And they decided they would show some people things that was just only bad news. Little kid hit by car and whatever. And just to ruin your goddamn day, to test to see whether they can do that or not. Whether they can like own your mind and control what it is that you think and you care about. And of course, the answer is yeah. Like you sign up to open your eye to whatever that feed is. And especially when you think that you just signed up to follow the people that you signed up to follow, right? But they're picking and choosing what you see. In fact, that was one of the main things when I absolutely quit Facebook cold turkey in 2014. Screw them, man, and switched to Twitter. And the first best thing about Twitter was Twitter just shows you the people that you follow. Right. There was no algorithm yet. I don't know when it was, 2016 or whatever, and they finally implemented it. Or maybe it was 15 or 16 when they finally put one on there. But at first, it was just, that was what was great about Twitter. It was just you see what you signed up to see. And what the hell, like, isn't that the most obvious thing in the world that that's how it should be? Isn't that what everybody wants? You click follow. What the hell? I gotta like smash the like button and the alert button and all of this stuff. Like, what is this? The whole thing's crazy, dude. And I don't know if there's, like, if you remember in 2008 when people just quit MySpace and the whole internet moved to Facebook all at once. Like, I don't know if something like that could ever happen again. You can see the liberals are trying to do that this week. In fact, the right-wingers tried to do this with Gab and Mastodon and some of the others in the past, Minds and whatever, and it never took because they're just not good enough. They just don't compare to Twitter, and everybody's not there already, you know, kind of thing. And so you see the liberals kind of trying to do that now to see if they can move to somewhere else. But I like the idea. I hate the name for this. I don't know who came up with this. The Fediverse, which is the federated universe, which means like a million little Facebooks all hooked together, or a million little Twitters on separate things. But it has the name Fed in it. Like, nobody's going to sign up for that. You might as well call it the CIA book. We're not going to do it, which is what Facebook is anyway. But still, you can't call it that. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, but that's the idea. I think that there shouldn't be a Facebook.com or a Twitter.com. It should just be an app on your desktop. That's your social media. And then by some sort of common consensus, we all sign up to the same app at once. You know what I mean? Like, there was at some point.
Jack's building that now. It's called Blue Sky.
Oh yeah, okay, there you go. So I don't know enough about that, but
yeah, Jack's got so basically he's doing a decentralized version of Twitter, and I'm very interested to see how that turns out. As soon as it comes out, I'm going to be on it, but it's going to operate off of I believe it's going to operate off of blockchain technology.
Let's do that.
I'm not sure, but it's going to be just a protocol. So there's no centralized entity that can say what can and cannot live on this thing. I'm guessing. I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes.
Right. Yeah. No, I just, to me, that's the obvious solution. Why should there be any board of directors that can be under the influence of the Department of Homeland Security? But for people who might have missed this in the last week, because it didn't get that much coverage, right? Because of exactly what we're talking about. Ken Klippenstein of The Intercept got a hold of a ton of documents about the Department of Homeland Security and their influence over Twitter and Facebook and Google and the rest. And this is should have been a huge story. It's the kind of story where the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal should have to cover it the next day and say, well, yes, competition news outlet did break this story that is, holy crap, huge and important. No, they did not cover it.
Crickets.
But it's unbelievable that they didn't. I mean, they should have had.
I know you're a libertarian, so I apologize for having to ask you this question. But Trump versus DeSantis, who is the better pick in your opinion for 2024?
Wow. Listen, I mean, DeSantis, I'm glad that he was rewarded with his re-election as governor for being less worse on the COVID regime and frankly being brave and standing up to the pressure on the COVID regime. And I know he was bad at first and whatever, but he was one of the first to loosen up. And then because he's the governor of Florida, he was under incredible pressure to conform to national government dictates, and he just refused to do it. And that's great. However, he's a horrible bastard. And he was a congressman before, right? So he's already on the record about everything in the world. He might as well live in Netanyahu's pants pocket. Right? That's who he is. He's Mike Pompeo. You know, Governor Pompeo was a little bit less worse on COVID. Great. He's still Mike Pompeo, right? The devil, the rat bastard, enemy of you and your family in this country, servant of foreign powers, servant of the world empire. So,
and Trump
DeSantis is no better than that. DeSantis went to Israel and signed a law in Israel, making it a crime for you to criticize Israel or their policies on Florida college campuses. And they go, oh, no, it's just against anti-Semitism. But if you go, yeah, what about the rights of Palestinians? They go, that's anti-Semitism, right? Like if we were in Mississippi and it was 1920, and you said, well, what about the right of black people in Mississippi? And I said, you're an anti-whiteite. You hear that? White genocide. He's saying we have to end Jim Crow in Mississippi, everybody. You hear that? You can't talk like that on a Mississippi college campus. I guess I could have just stuck with Florida, right? You can't talk like that on a Florida college campus in 1922. That's their version of anti-Semitism, criticizing anything that the state of Israel is doing, right? Mm-hmm. Like as though there's some rash of people just attacking Jewish students for being Jews in Florida. Yeah, right. That's what the law was about. And can you imagine a governor of a state going to a foreign country to sign a law in direct violation of the First Amendment and the basic natural right of freedom of speech and the basic academic right to argue about whatever the hell you want? Because this is a university, dude. Mm-hmm. And this guy is an enemy of freedom. He's a horrible person. It's the same as Donald Trump. People would say to me, why does Donald Trump do these things? Because he's a bad person. That's why. If I offered you money to kill a bunch of Arabs, you would say no. Donald Trump says yes, just for money, because he's a bad person. And people go, oh no, Donald Trump, you know, he didn't start any new wars. Look, I admit that on a sliding scale, it's true. Okay, Obama started 5, Bush started 3, Clinton started 3, Bush started 2, Reagan probably, you know, Grenada, I don't know, there's a few. The Contras in Nicaragua are pretty bad. Jimmy Carter started a few. But what did Donald Trump do? He escalated Afghanistan for 4 years before finally getting us out. Killed an extra probably 100,000 people. Massive escalation of the air campaign there. Not that anybody cared, but it was true. Same thing in Somalia. Same thing with finishing up Iraq War III in Iraq and Syria. He told James Mattis, take the gloves off, man. In other words, anything this side of legal, light them up, man. That's it. Any restriction that the Obama people came up with.
Well, I have a question.
And then the war in Yemen, too, the worst one of all, continued the war in Yemen every day for 4 years. And they asked him, why are we doing this? And he goes, because they're paying us $450 billion, which is, you know what, man? That's true. Over the next 130 years or so at the current rate, Saudi will spend 450. They spend about $3 billion a year. That's the real number. See, he's just a liar. He changes the 3 to a 4 and adds 2 more zeros to it and says that's a good enough price for a genocide, for a campaign of starvation against the men, women, and especially the children under 5 years old of Yemen.
Why Yemen?
That was his only rationalization for it.
But why Yemen? Does this have to do with the oil wars?
No, it's because the Saudis were mad that a group of Shiites took over in the end of 2014, beginning of 2015. And in fact, our current Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, who was then the 4-star general commander of Central Command, he had a deal with the new group of Shiites that had taken over. They're called the Houthis. And he made a deal with them to give them intelligence to use to kill Al-Qaeda. Because to the Al-Qaeda guys, the only good Shiite is a dead Shiite. So when these Shiites took over, Austin was like, hey, what if I give you intel and then you use it to kill these Al-Qaeda guys? And the Houthis were like, yeah, let's do that. And that was what they were doing in January and February. And then in March, Barack Obama and Lloyd Austin stabbed them in the back and turned around and took Al-Qaeda's side against them because that was what Saudi Arabia wanted. And in the words of the Obama people to the New York Times, we had to do this to placate the Saudis, right? So like before that, from 2009 through 15, that was the war against Al-Qaeda. And they would say, well, look, we're just protecting you from these Al-Qaeda guys. Of course, they were only making Al-Qaeda more and more powerful by bombing them. That's the way that works, insurgent math, But they were going after actual enemies of the United States, people who had killed American civilians in the past and so forth, and military too. But then in 2015, they switched sides. And they took Al-Qaeda's side in the war against the Shiites. And then this is the war because you remember in Libya in 11, they said, well, we're leading from behind. Like everybody knows this is America's war, but they dressed it up as a NATO war. It's Britain and France and Italy are really leading the way on this thing against Gaddafi, which wasn't really true. It's our planes, it's our bombs, it's our aircraft carriers, it's our, air power control, logistics, everything, Well, same thing here. We're leading from behind, but you see what that does is it diffuses the responsibility, right? So they're using our planes and our bombs to kill all these people. They're using, in fact, they have our intelligence people on the ground coordinating the logistics and the intelligence, the targeting and everything. Got our Navy enforcing the blockade, all the maintenance, the resupply of the bombs, everything. It's completely dependent on America and Britain and France too, but America like 80%, about 20% the Brits and, remainder the French. So they can't do it without us.
Right.
But they can do all kinds of things that our guys might not do. But it's not us doing it. So
right.
For example, like deliberately bombing the waterworks, the hospitals, the water, the sewage, the electricity, the farms. The Americans, now under H.W. Bush in Iraq War I, they did that. And there may have been a little bit of that in the air war in Libya in 2011 as well. But I don't think very much of that. I think, typically the Americans in this era have tried to leave the country mostly intact and just overthrow the state, kind of thing. But what the Saudis have done here is just deliberately target civilian infrastructure all across the country. Anything that sustains the civilian population has been the target, and including the blockade, starvation blockade. So they have had these horrible cholera outbreaks, and the official numbers are something like 500,000 civilians have been deprived to death, which is almost entirely children under 5 years old. And I guarantee you the number's higher than that. It's definitely more than 500,000 already. So it amounts to a genocide. It's, what do you call it when one country or a group of countries deliberately inflicts a famine on another country, right? And that's what, Obama started it, and that's what Trump continued for 4 years straight. So
I have a question in regards to that.
He belongs in a prison cell with the rest of these guys.
I'm under the impression that when it comes to foreign wars, that's above the president's pay grade. I believe there's some mysterious guy above that's like, look, you're going to continue this war otherwise, and then they play the Kennedy tape. Do you think it's that? It's not really Trump making those calls?
A little bit of that.
Okay.
Well, look, it's like this. One of the wisest things anybody ever told me was, I think it was probably just a guy in my cab, said to me, look, man, it's not a conspiracy. It's just politics. And it is as bad as you say, but just forget all the robes and torches and secret handshakes and all this crap, man. It's boardroom tables where these decisions are being made, essentially. And yes, there are interests that must be kept happy. And that includes not only the military industrial complex in terms of all the profit motive from the arms manufacturers, but that includes the generals and the admirals themselves. And these men are the kings of the world empire. And the amount of power that they have to influence, countries you never heard of, right? Where they can go in and say, never mind what the ambassador told you, this is the real policy. And the Pentagon is the empire. I mean, and hell, speaking of the ambassador, the State Department too, the CIA too, the banks that service all the transactions on all those payments to all those contractors, right? And it's a hell of a dirty snowball. One guy said to me, you could literally have a situation where there's a CIA guy who you've never heard of and a State Department guy who you've never heard of and some mercenary who you've never heard of who got a really great heroin thing going on in Afghanistan right now. And they are in a position to prevent things from happening and to make things happen to keep the thing going longer. And so it's comforting in a way to think that you really do have like the skull and bones table, where if Biden's not the real president, then the head patriarch at Skull and Bones is. Somebody has veto power. Somebody is the captain of the ship. Where then, no, actually, the problem is that this world empire is out of control. And there's probably, as far as I could tell, I don't know exactly how you measure this, but it sure seems to me like Israel and Saudi Arabia have as much influence in the United States of America over our foreign policy as any domestic faction that exists anywhere. Never mind the mass of us regular people out here. But even when it comes to oil, Israel teamed up with Lockheed to launch Iraq War II, which oil didn't want. The oil guys were like, nah, we would rather deal with Saddam. We don't want all this instability and all this crap. People said no blood for oil. It wasn't about oil. It was about Israel and about Lockheed products getting sold to the captive market of the Pentagon was what it was really about more than anything else. And so...
And China recently, you saw with the investigation on the Biden family, they're ready to just, put our natural gas and shale on the table for the Chinese too. So wouldn't China be involved as well? Hold on one second.
China!
That's funny. Well, I don't know exactly what you're referring to there, but I know, China desperately needs American and other natural resources from around the world. They don't produce hardly, I think they have a little bit of oil, but they barely produce any of their own energy, and they, import raw materials for just about everything that they make. So, I'm not sure how on the take Biden is. I really should look more at that.
It just came out a couple of weeks ago. I think it was.
You got to know though that his policy is as absolutely hawkish on China as Trump, or worse. This whole pivot to Asia was Hillary Clinton. You read her big article in foreignpolicy.com from 2011 about America's Pacific century. And it's time for us to get out of the Middle East and pivot to China. In fact, despite all the hype about Russia, even today, even just last month in the new national security strategy, officially China is still number one and Russia number two. Never mind terrorism. They said that Islam made people want to kill you forever and ever and ever, and somehow that problem just went away. They were lying about that. But so Trump kept that same hawkish policy that he inherited from Obama, and Biden kept the same hawkish policy that he inherited from Trump. So he sailed our Navy through the Taiwan Straits over and over and over again, and all his freedom of navigation of the seas, patrols through the South China Sea, and ratcheting up essentially tensions with Taiwan. I believe it's 4 times, or is it 5 times now, that Biden has essentially taken back the one China policy and said, which is a little bit complicated, but I can say it fast, I think. Nixon went over there. Nixon and Kissinger went over there in 72, 73. They shook hands with Mao Zedong, and they ended the Cold War with China. And they were trying to break them off from the Soviet Union, split them away. And also they were trying to make it okay that we lost the war in Vietnam, because what the hell, we're friends with the Chinese now. This is 74. So then by 79, they had really codified under Jimmy Carter what was called the One China policy that had this baked in strategic ambiguity. And essentially it goes like this. And remember now, at this time, the Chinese were just coming out of communism, like real Marxist communism. In other words, starvation and just absolute poverty. I mean, Mao had reduced China to caveman levels.
Right.
And people were eating each other's children and shit. It was completely out of control.
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 million people starved to death. So they're just coming out of that. America is a million times more powerful than China at this point. So we have the ability to dictate terms, essentially. And we tell them, look, here's what it's going to be. We recognize you as the official government of China, not Taiwan, which the American government had pretended since 1949 that the government in Taiwan was the real government of all of mainland China. Which, like, come on, man, it's been 30 years. You can't just keep pretending that. You know what I mean? It's like pretending that Cuba is the real government of the United States or something. Like, it's just not true. So they said, well, we're going to stop that. China gets to sit on the UN Security Council. We're going to officially recognize Beijing, and we're going to recognize that Beijing is the government of not just mainland China, but of Taiwan too. And Taiwan is part of China. However, we would really prefer to see China and Taiwan reunited peacefully someday. And we're not saying what we would do to China if they attack, because we don't want to make the Taiwanese feel too brave and declare independence, which will provoke the Chinese into attacking. So on one hand, we tell the Chinese, listen, man, don't do it, okay? I'm not saying what I'll do to you if you do, but don't.
Right.
And then we turn to our Taiwanese friends and we say, you pipe down. You don't go declare independence and provoke a fight, because I'm not promising that I have your back. So don't you go thinking that you can drag me in, because that might not work and I might leave your ass to get beat, right? So that's the policy. And that's kept the peace for 50 years, 45, 50 years, you know, depending on how you count between Nixon and Carter there. But essentially since 79, at least, so 40-something years, 45 years almost, has kept the peace there. And so what Biden did was Biden goes, oh, no, yeah, if China messes with Taiwan, we will 100% definitely take Taiwan's back, no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. So now, right-wing narrative about Biden being in China's pocket, I don't think so. You know, that sure is not what it sounds like. Whatever corruption he bought into there, they did not buy his national security policy with that. You know, and he has said over and over again. And then what happens? You know what happens? The White House then puts out a memo that says he didn't mean that. And our policy has not changed, which gets back to your question. Who's the president then? If the president is not the White House, who's the White House? Right? And so, you know, I don't know. I know how people feel about this in a lot of different ways, about just how much of a figurehead the president is and who really calls the shots. I have to tell you, man, I think ultimately the official story is mostly right, that the president and his staff, his cabinet, while very seriously taking into account the concerns of major factions, that ultimately it comes down to the deputies committee, the principals committee, and then eventually the president on most of these questions. Okay. You know, if they can't agree, then they kick it up one more notch. And then it comes down on the biggest decisions. It comes down to the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor, and the president sitting there and figuring out what they're going to do.
All right. So this gives me
I think he is. And look, Biden has wanted to be the president his whole life. So if anybody thinks he became president so he can sit behind the Resolute desk and then just let Jake Sullivan be the president and not really be the president, I don't think that that's right. You know, I think it is true that he's napping a lot and that, you know, it ain't the same as if he was 25 years younger. But I don't think it's right to say that he's not really the president. He's just a figurehead, that kind of thing. But it is certainly a fair question to wonder about, and especially when it is a guy like Biden, who is so old and senile and just weird. He's always been the kind of guy who just blabs and blabs and says crazy stuff that he's kind of got to walk back. So having him in there and then, you know, constantly making public pronouncements that they have to walk back, and especially on serious things like Taiwan policy like that and stuff like that. Like it seriously does raise the question of the degree to which he's the final decision maker on these things.
So I have this theory that and I'm an objective person, I think all types of crazy things, that imperialism is good for a United States citizen. You know, the fact that we go around the world and we kick ass makes U.S. safe. It's, in some ways, imperialism's good, no?
Well, I don't know who you think is a threat to us. I mean, the reality is, at the end of the Soviet Union 30 years ago, we'd already made peace with China 20 years before that, right? And then the idea was, oh no, maybe Germany and Japan are going to come back. But is that what happened the last 30 years? Instead, America is the dominant world power, and we're holding down what? Every country in Europe is our friend. Every country in Asia essentially is our friend. I mean, we've only really started heating up tension with China in the last, 10 years. But things have been pretty damn good with us. And they're still our second biggest trading partner after Canada, I believe. And other than the very recent worst tensions with Russia, I mean, even during the low-level fighting in the Donbass for the last 8 years before this year, Putin still always called America our partners, who we're working together with them on this, that, whatever, this other thing. I mean, whatever you want to say about right-wing strongman Vladimir Putin's Russia, it ain't the Soviet Union. And it is not an expansionist threat to our allies, even in Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia and Poland, much less Germany and France and Britain, right? And then spin the globe. Who do you got? India? They have nuclear weapons, but are all pointed at Pakistan, right? They have no pretension of global power to build a blue water navy anytime in the next 300 years, right? They also are coming up essentially from communism, and slowly, because they won't quit it. So they are compared to China. Look at their same populations, but China's shift away from Marxist economics compared to India's. They have entrepreneurial sectors in some places, but they got a lot of Marxism too. And it's a desperately poor country. And then that's it, bro. There are no powers in Latin America. There are no powers in Africa. We're out of continents. Spin the globe and spin it again. If the lost continent of Atlantis pops up in the mid-Atlantic Ocean and starts pointing their H-bombs at us and threaten to take Florida away, we got a problem. But the common fantasies on the right that like somehow China's coming here, man, China ain't even coming to Vietnam. And they might come to Taiwan. But Taiwan, again, is part of China. It's been part of China since the 1600s, right? Since before the colonies broke away from Britain by 100 years, right? That no one really believes, who knows anything about it, believes that China is coming to Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Bhutan, Pakistan, outer Mongolia, maybe. But Korea, Japan, no, they are not either. They're not. And then they're going to build 100,000 troop ships to sail the entire People's Liberation Army to California and take our country away from us. Like, even if you were asleep dreaming, that wouldn't make any sense. You ever seen how big the Pacific Ocean is? We pick off each and every single one of those boats before they even cross the date line, right? It's crazy. So
where did the breakdown happen between U.S. and Russia?
I'm sorry?
Where did the breakdown happen between U.S. and Russia?
Well, it's all really, I like to say it's Bill Clinton's fault, but it was really H.W. Bush. I'm learning more and more about this now because I'm writing a book about it. All right, so check it out. Picture the map of Europe now. The USSR and their allies in the Warsaw Pact spread all the way to halfway across Germany, right? The Elbe River. And everything west of there belongs to America and our friends, and everything east of there belongs to the Soviet Union. So Gorbachev agreed to withdraw his troops out of Germany and allow the reunification of Germany as long as America promised not to spread our NATO alliance eastward. Now, a lot of horrible liars and a lot of stupid idiots who believe horrible liars will tell you that that's not true and the promise was never made, or the promise only counted for inside Germany, but it didn't apply to Poland or whatever. That's a bunch of crap.
What they say is it was a handshake agreement.
Well, that's right. But it's also in writing in terms of like they wrote it down in their notes that this is what we all agreed about today. And so then, I mean, this is exactly right. Is they said first, they go, that promise was never made. And then they prove that it was made. And they go, well, we got testimony of people who said they were there. And they go, okay, well, but it wasn't in writing. And they go, yeah, but here at the George Washington University National Security Archive, they went ahead and published all of these documents that have signatures on them by these guys. And so, yeah. And then they go, oh, yeah, well, it wasn't a treaty. And they go, oh, yeah, look, no, they only promised not to expand NATO into East Germany. But that doesn't imply anything about going further east than that. Come on. That's a lie. And we have it like in their own words. We got it in their own words. They said the word Poland. That, of course, includes Poland. We wouldn't even think of that. And even Biden said in 97, oh, the Russians want to pretend this is a threat to them. That's crazy. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like if we brought the Baltics in, I mean, that would obviously be a bridge too far, right? So we did. Bush did in 2004, right? So here's what happened. Bush Jr. did. But Bush Sr., so here's the deal. When the Russians promised that they would withdraw from, in fact, they dissolved the whole Warsaw Pact and the whole damn thing fell apart by Christmas 91. Even the Baltic states, Belarus, Ukraine, and the southern stands, and everybody was free by the end of 91. And then now during this whole time, because it took from, the beginning of the end of the fall of the thing, started at the end of 88 when people started fleeing from Hungary into neutral Austria, and the Soviets did not machine gun them to death for trying to flee. And then that was it. The dam was broken, and eventually the wall came down, and the whole thing unraveled after that. But so it took, from the end of 88 to the end of 91 for the whole thing to completely finish unraveling, right? So now during this time, Bush Sr. and his men are telling the Soviets that, man, we promise to be good sports about this. We are not going to take advantage. We are not going to spread into Eastern Europe. And in fact, like NATO, we're going to transition it into a political organization to kind of parallel with the EU. And we're going to replace it as a military organization with this new partnership for peace. And you can join it. So Russia and all of your former stands, Ukraine and whoever, you guys can all join the partnership for peace with us. But now we know from the academic literature and so forth and all the unearthed records, they were lying. They knew that their plan always was to expand NATO at Russia's expense, but that if we let them know that now, they're going to freak out and clamp down and refuse to let these countries go. So we want to make them feel as good about it as we can, but they were playing them, right? So usually, and even from me, Bill Clinton gets the blame, but that's really not true. It was the Bush Senior guys were lying all along, playing a double game all along. Then the Bill Clinton guys came in and they were divided, but eventually the NATO guys won. There were some who wanted to do the partnership for peace. And I got to tell you, man, in the 1990s, and it's funny too, I really want to like zoom out and analyze exactly like where all I was getting this from and where all this was really coming from. Because the New World Order conspiracy in the 90s was that we're going to bring Russia into NATO or bring Russia into our military alliance. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, man, just like the skull and bones, right? They're our enemies. We become more like them. You might have noticed America's totalitarian police state. They become more like us and giving up communism and embracing kind of right-wing corporatism, right? And then we join together as the one white army of the North to lord it over the Chinese, to lord it over Islamic South Asia, right? Where NATO is the one world army of the United Nations. That's the New World Order right there. So, but actually, that was a way better option compared to what they were really doing, which was, I wonder if I was just like, that whole conspiracy was actually just a bunch of propaganda to drum up opposition to the Partnership for Peace in favor of the right-wing take, which was NATO expansion and screw Russia. And the idea was, one, this isn't really an anti-Russian alliance because we're not planning on attacking Russia, and we don't think that Russia's coming this way. So we're just expanding this so we can sell Lockheed products first and foremost to the American taxpayer. but also they had kind of some high-minded, I got to give them a little bit of credit for their motive anyway, that they said, look, the borders between Slovenia and Slovakia and the Czech Republic and Poland and Latvia and Lithuania and Ukraine and all this, they're always in the wrong place, right? They've been drawn through war over eons. And now that the Soviet Union is breaking up and is no longer dominant, we could have border wars break out throughout Eastern Europe. We saw Yugoslavia fall apart in violence, and we could have more of that. And they said, but if we invite everybody into NATO, well, then they just can't fight over their borders. They'll have to work it out if all their militaries are integrated with ours, right? And it'll prevent military dictatorships because the rules are you have to have civilian supremacy over your military or we won't let you in our group. So this will help protect the countries of Eastern Europe from becoming dictatorships. It'll keep them democracies. This kind of, so they had these rationalizations for why this was all okay. But then when it comes to the Russians, the idea was, well, this isn't really at their expense, so they shouldn't worry about it. And if they have any worries about it, well, those are stupid, illegitimate worries. So we don't have to be concerned about that. And then 2 or 3, also, screw them. What are they going to do about it? We're so much more powerful than them now that they can just complain all they want and they can't stop us. And they just said that over and over and over again. And you can find insiders saying that the other insiders would not consider the Soviets' concerns serious at all. They would just laugh them off and just screw you. You know, Vladimir Putin gave a speech at the Munich conference in 2007, which you could call a temper tantrum. He's up there stomping his feet and going, damn it, why won't you people listen to me? You're really pissing me off. X, Y, Z. And they all like, geez, you get a load of that Putin guy today? What's his problem? And just treat it like it's a bunch of crap from him. Instead of like he was absolutely at the end of his rope and screaming in their faces, I'm warning you, goddammit, you know, this kind of thing, which is what he was really doing. And they would just refuse to take those concerns seriously. Now, and then here's the thing too, is I think that they decided by like what, 3 or 4, that they really don't like Putin and that he's too independent from them. I mean, it may have been certainly by 2002. I mean, they tore up the anti-ballistic missile treaty in December 2001, which was a huge provocation, which we know now the Russians embarked on a massive new nuclear weapons program in response to that. Secretly, that they debuted in 2018, a massive new improvement in their nuclear weapons capability in response to W. Bush doing that. But, you know, essentially, again, with the NATO expansion, they did not want to do any of this partnership for peace. They did not want to, like, even when they had the NATO-Russia Council, they kind of refused to treat them with any kind of real respect. Or as any kind of partner. They will be consulted after the fact. Hey, Russia, here's what we've decided to do. Chump, you know, this kind of thing. And then Bush came in. So Clinton expanded by 3 in 1999, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and Poland. And then 3 weeks later, launched the war against Serbia to break off Kosovo in 1999. Oh, no, it's strictly a defensive organization. We would never start a war. They immediately start a war, right? They said out of area or out of business. We have to find, doesn't that sound like a government program? We have to find something to do or else they're going to take our cushy jobs away. And so they had to find a war to get in. And then when W. Bush came in, he, well, there's a few things here real quick. I'll try to speed up it. He vastly expanded the NATO alliance, including into the Baltic states. And he did, and Clinton had started this with Serbia. But Bush continued with what are called the color-coded revolutions. And these are essentially coup d'etats dressed up as revolutions. So they did this first against Milosevic in Serbia in 2000. Then they did, Shevardnadze in Georgia in favor of Saakashvili in 2003, the Rose Revolution. Then they did the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in 2004. The Denim Revolution in Belarus in 2005, and also in 2005 was in Kyrgyzstan and in Lebanon. They did the Lemon Revolution or the Pink Revolution. It was kind of both in Kyrgyzstan, and then the Cedar Revolution in Lebanon, that latter which failed. But then this is the same thing that Obama did that culminated in the coup of 2014. So on one hand, they go, look, This isn't an anti-Russian alliance. We don't know what your problem is, man. All we're doing is spreading peace and stability and this and that. But any government that doesn't want to get with the program, we overthrow them. So
much for
that's,
peace.
Democracy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with the so-called revolution of 2014, the Maidan Revolution, this is the democratically elected. They say that their whole religion here is democracy. That's what this is all about. But if there's a democratic election that goes the way that they don't want, they'll cancel it immediately. Like Algeria in 1993, in Gaza Strip in 2006, in the Orange Revolution of 2004, and then here in Ukraine in 2014. The guy had won in 2010, and they had a dispute over whether he was going to sign a trade deal with the EU or with Russia. And he changed his mind at the last minute and told the EU to go to hell and went with the Russians. And then, so not so much pro-EU as much as anti-Russian factions, waged this massive protest movement in the capital there, supported with vast sums of money from the West, from American, U.S. aid and NED, along with George Soros and Pierre Omidyar, the guy that bankrolls The Intercept, financed the NGOs that financed the movement. So it's the dead of winter from November through February. People are out there demonstrating by the thousands in the Maidan. Well, who's paying for all the hydrocarbons to keep them warm? And who's paying for the entertainment on stage, the band's playing? Who's distributing the food and providing the shelter and everything? This is millions and millions and millions of dollars are being spent on this thing. And, they call it grassroots, but it's AstroTurf, man. And then the violent putsch was eventually led by a bunch of Hitler-loving Nazis, the Right Sector and Svoboda. And there was actually a guy from C14, that stands for the 14 words of David Lane and the white supremacist about securing the future of white children and all that. So that group, C14, I think just this year, or maybe it was late last year, they did some presentation at some think tank or something where they're on stage talking about all this. And the guy says, look, it's true. We were only like 10% of the protesters there. It's a good thing, too, because if we weren't there, the whole thing would have just turned into a big gay pride parade. And we were the ones who accomplished, and I don't want to put too many words in his mouth, but you can look at it. They were the ones who were the action, right? All the liberal protesters, whoever showed up, they were the supporting cast, but it was the Nazis who were the power. And what happened was the Americans in the EU coerced the president into signing a deal that he would stand for new elections in December, and the protesters would agree to that and pull their forces back. So, and he pulled his police back, but they refused the deal and instead seized the government buildings and chased him out of town. So, George Friedman from Stratford called that the most blatant coup in world history. And so I want to go on a tangent 1 second. People go, oh, man, you're denying the agency of the people who were there, who were trying to support their own revolution. Yeah, well, you know what? Tough. That's what happens when you are a person, a civilian actor in a small, weak country stuck in a major power conflict. You are somebody's sock puppet. If you're supporting the pro-Russian party, the party of regions, and their guy, you're pretty much doing what the Russians want you to do. And if you're out there in the Maidan insisting that guy be overthrown and providing that pressure from below, well, you're a sock puppet of the CIA. Sorry. And yes, I'm sorry, but that's true. It's just like, think of anything else where you talk about like a giant billionaire funder puts his backing behind some group. Like, well, are they like just fake cartoon characters? No, they're real people who got up in the morning and did their thing, but there's a reason that this interest has decided to come and push the thing that they're doing, right? It's the same kind of thing here. So yes, these people wanted to look at Syria's a great example. Had a lot of people from all walks of life wanted to overthrow their hereditary dictatorship. But immediately, CIA, USA, Saudi, Israel, Turkey, Qatar started backing a bunch of head-chopping, crazy, suicide bomber, bin Ladenite freaking maniacs, absolute maniacs. And so if you are now some well-meaning socialist protester out in the street who wants to have regular elections every couple of years from now on, well, sorry, you are essentially pressure from below, serving the interests of Ayman al-Zawahiri and Barack Obama. Tough. I'm denying you agency. You don't have any. It's the same thing here. Like, yes, of course, these people wanted what they want, but they were used by the Americans to do what they wanted. And, you know, I'm sure you probably saw that clip of Dave Smith explaining this stuff to Joe Rogan last time he was on. The clip, the YouTube highlight clip, got 7 million views so far on it. And part of that clip is they just stop and Dave shows Rogan the clip of Gideon Rose on the Colbert Report. Now, Gideon Rose is the editor of Foreign Affairs magazine, the journal of the Council on Foreign Relations, the center of the American foreign policy establishment since 1921, right? And he comes on the Colbert Show, and like, I don't even know who made this decision. Like, yeah, we should go in Colbert and do this. Like, seemed like a weird kind of public relations thing to do, to even put him on to talk about it. But then he's just blatantly saying, we are stealing Ukraine away from Russia. Russia's, he says, and you know what? These so-called libertarian Ukrainian types have attacked me and said that this is what I said, when all I was doing was quoting Gideon Rose. It was his characterization. I'm not saying correctly.
Right.
I'm saying it's the quote is correct, but I'm not saying his characterization is correct. I'm saying this is the way he phrased it. Ukraine is Russia's girlfriend, and we're breaking them up. She's with a bad guy from the hood, and we want her to switch up to a nice yuppie from the suburbs. That's what he says. He says Ukraine is Robin to Russia's Batman, and we're here to break up the dynamic duo.
So explain this to me. I see there's anytime Congress is bipartisan, I'm like, all right, something's afoot here. And they're all supporting this war in Ukraine. The right, the Republicans are all supporting it. Why are we sending all this money to Ukraine? Why are we all backing this war in Ukraine?
Well, look, I mean, to rewind it back, go back to, again, the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union ceased to exist, and H.W. Bush took us to war in Iraq War I, after telling Saddam, go ahead and invade Kuwait, see if we give a damn, and then launch a massive war in order to force him back out again. In the aftermath of that, and Dick Cheney was then the Secretary of Defense, and under him was Paul Wolfowitz, Zalmay Khalilzad, and Scooter Libby, the neoconservative ideologues, and in the case of Wolfowitz and Libby, Israeli agents of influence. And they wrote the doctrine, is called the Defense Planning Guidance for 1994. And it's, you know, it was even scandalous in the New York Times at the time. It said that in the new world, after the Soviet Union, that America will be the dominant military and political power on the entire planet, on every continent on this planet, and that we will not tolerate essentially any independence from the global system as dictated by us, not the UN Charter, but our interpretation of it, and that everyone will essentially fall in line and be assimilated. That any country that attempts to arm up against us, we'll destroy them first. We'll wage preemptive war to prevent any near-peer competitor, any power or regional grouping of powers from allying against us in anything that could amount to a true challenge to our power. And so then at that time, Russia was under our thumb under Boris Yeltsin. And the idea was we're going to do everything we can to keep them that way. But that ultimately Russia is big and vast and a pretty alien society to ours. And our inroads of control into their society did not go that deep. So ultimately, Putin was able to declare independence from us. And the Americans helped him come to power. He was part of Yeltsin's faction, and he was given the job because of his corruption and helping the pro-American factions get away with their corruption. But once he got in there, he essentially cut off, not immediately, but almost immediately, he cut off all the foreign-backed oligarchs and started prosecuting them. And he told all the domestic oligarchs that, look, you guys can keep your money, but you're getting out of politics. You're done with politics. And I am the toughest son of a bitch in the room. And if you mess with me, I'll destroy you. And which he did. He locked up Khodorkovsky and some others, and he purged the oligarchs he didn't like and kept his own. And which is essentially like, you know, declaring his independence from America's dominated global system. Now, he kept open trade, and he tried to keep open relationships with the West in terms of, especially with Germany and with Europe, and tried to get along with the Americans as best he could. But I think he understood very well, again, that we're not doing the partnership for peace. We're doing NATO at your expense, pal. This is the unipolar world. That's the true new world order. It's not an alliance between us and Russia. It's America telling the whole world, you do what we say or we'll kill you. That was what H.W. Bush said. What we say goes, right? And so that was what it was really all about. And that's what it's still really all about. So what's wrong with Russia? They don't bow down. What's wrong with them? They're independent from us. And now, if you listen to Putin's declaration of war last February, he's talking about Ukraine. He says, listen, the Americans have reduced Ukraine to a colony. The government in Kiev is run out of Washington, D.C., and everybody knows that. It's not an independent country. We gave them independence. The communists let them go, but the Americans wouldn't let them just be independent. The Americans insisted that they had to belong to America. Well, no. They have to belong to somebody. It's going to be me, not you. Right? And I'm not justifying what he did, because in fact, even though it really was Obama that started this war in 2014, what Putin did in this war is he escalated it by 100,000 times. And I'm not justifying it. I'm not saying it was reasonable, the action he took, but it absolutely was rational. And people who say that what he did was simply, he'll come up with any excuse in the world, but all he really wanted to do was just seize Ukraine and all of that. I mean, there's just no reason to believe that that's true at all. I mean, when he seized the Crimean Peninsula in 2014, that was, again, only after Obama had overthrown the government there. But not only that, but 3 Ukrainian former presidents wrote a letter that said, now is our chance to kick the Russians out of the Sevastopol naval base and take it for ourselves. Only then did the Russians leave their naval base, the Marines and the sailors, and seize that peninsula, stand on those street corners and take it for their own. And no one was killed. It was a coup de main. They just kind of took it. And then Obama explained to Jeffrey Goldberg. He goes, look, Jeffrey Goldberg, when Putin took Crimea, that was not part of some grand plan to recreate the Russian Empire. He did that in a panic, in reaction to what had happened in the Maidan, where he even says, where we had helped broker this transition of power. Thank you, Obama. So out of the horse's mouth himself, the guiltiest party himself, he says, no, we provoked him into doing that. He's not just, taking advantage. We made him panic and go to that action. But in other words, he's admitting, right, that the status quo had held for 24 years. For 24 years, the Russians were happy to lease that base. So, and now this is 2014. Putin had been in power at that point for 14 years. Why didn't he seize Crimea back in 2004 or 2008 or 2010? He did it only after the Ukrainian government threatened to take his naval base away from him. And he said, forget it. And by the way, and I know this includes a lot of Ukrainians, but it was something like 300,000 or 400,000. I think it was 300,000 Soviets died keeping Crimea out of the hands of the German and Romanian Nazis in World War II. So think about that, like what West Point means to New Yorkers, what the Alamo means to Texans, something like that. Try to take San Diego away from the people of California, right? Like at the Alamo, how many people died? 110 or something? What if we'd lost 200,000 or 300,000 men fighting for San Antonio? How seriously do you think we'd take that then? That's how willing they were to give up Crimea, as willing as the Texicans are to give up San Antonio. Try it, right? And so the Americans act like, no, we have interests. No one else does. We have a sphere of influence. It's the entire sphere. No one else has one at all. We have a Monroe Doctrine, but it doesn't apply to Latin America. It applies to the whole planet. And there's just no legitimacy behind it. There's just not.
So who's
and the only thing that people can say is, well, geez, if it wasn't us, it would be someone else. But that's just not in evidence. In fact, we can't afford it. Look at the national debt right now. The middle part of North America is the most productive economic region ever, anywhere, ever. And we can't afford to dominate Eurasia. It's crazy to even try it.
I mean, it seems like it's happening. Biden been cutting checks like it's nothing.
Well, but as I know, there's a limit on that, right? Like we can really only go so far. And they'll do anything they can to prop up demand for American dollars around the world because they know that demand is going away. This is a desperate empire lashing out in collapse. The high watermark of American imperial power was 2003 when W. Bush went to Baghdad and thought that he won it, when all he was doing was giving it to Iran's friends. Mm-hmm. It's all been downhill from there. Look at China. China's already an overextended empire, right? They already have to rule over Tibet and Xinjiang and whatever. There's like 100 restive ethnic minorities essentially subsumed under the domination of the Han Chinese inside communist China. And they're surrounded. They got 14 nations on their borders. You think they're about to move out and move west and conquer Eurasia? No, they're not. They can't. They're in no position whatsoever to do that. Neither are the Russians. The Russians' economy is equivalent to that of South Korea, Italy, or New York City. New York City, not even state. So that's it. There is no world empire. In fact, one more thing here is that, look, at the dawn of the New Order, at the end of the Cold War, Charles Krauthammer said in Foreign Affairs, he said, this is our unipolar moment. And the idea was we have a chance now for a period of time to make the world the way we want until we can't dictate to the world anymore, because eventually the Chinese, the Indians, the Brazilians, and eventually the Russians again will be wealthy enough, will be economically powerful enough to be independent enough from us that we will have to listen to them. They will have to have a say in the world order. But for now, we can do whatever we want. It's the unipolar moment. We're going to try to set the structure up so that we stay dominant even as these other powers come up and all that. But then they hired Bill Clinton and George Bush and Barack Obama and Donald Trump and Joe Biden and John McCain to run the damn thing, right? Some unipolar moment. You couldn't have picked a worse team. Hillary Clinton, you think she knows what to do? For Christ's sake, man. So they just ran the damn thing into the ground. So unipolar moment is over. Unipolar moment is gone. Now is not the rise of a new single power to dominate the planet, Russia or China or India or Brazil. They're just getting rich enough that we have to listen to them sometimes.
Now
that's all it is.
Now you know enough of war history to maybe predict the future of Ukraine and this whole conflict. What do you think is going to come of all of this, whenever this conflict ends or whatever it's supposed to do?
I don't know, man. I hope that they negotiate right now. I think that if I got to characterize it, I picture right now what we have is the irresistible force versus the unmovable object here, right? The Russians have a massive army, 400,000 something men, the vast majority of which they have not sent in. Apparently, they're preparing to send another 200,000, and they have about 200,000 now, and they're about to send another 200,000 in once the ground is frozen. Now then, I think a lot of people all across the spectrum thought that they would win this war easily, but the Ukrainians are fighting total war, man, in defense of their homeland. They've got home turf advantage big time. And they've had the American Rangers and Green Berets over there training them on anti-tank missiles and all of these things for 8 years leading up to this. So they put up a hell of an initial fight there. Being armed and funded and trained by NATO in the West. They got American AWACS flying over the Black Sea, helping coordinate, with radars and intelligence. They bragged that they've helped the Ukrainians target Russian generals, bragged that they helped them target and sink the Russians, the flagship of their Black Sea fleet. And they've given them, and they're constantly announced, they brag constantly publicly about every bit of new missiles and new longer range artillery and new and better equipment that they're giving to the Ukrainians. And I think that it's undeniable that that really has made a difference in a major way. So now here comes the wintertime. The Russians are prepared to send in this massive offensive. But dude, we're talking about a country the size of Texas here, right? Which the size of Afghanistan, the size of France, right? This is a huge nation state. So, I think that the Russians' objectives at this point are probably limited to taking the southeast. I mean, I don't know. They already lost. Maybe they could retake. They already held and then lost northern Luhansk. They still control the southern part of the Luhansk province, and they control pretty much all of Donetsk, I believe, and including the so-called land bridge through the city of Mariupol all the way to the Crimean Peninsula. And I think, like, we should just call timeout right now, man. Honestly, I think it's only going to get worse. And I think that that's apparently the point of view of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Milley. He said, so there's the city Kherson, which is to the northwest of the Crimean Peninsula. If you think of Kherson as like the New Orleans of the Dnieper River, it's the last big major port city at the southern end of this river before it empties into the Gulf there, right into the Black Sea. So it's a huge, important city, and the Russians had seized it at the beginning of the war, and they just backed out of there, like basically willingly, and let the Ukrainians just come right back in and take it. And so Milley said, "Great, we just did real good in Kherson. Let's sit at a table and talk." Which, to me, I'm inferring from that what that means is he thinks it's reasonable to conclude that the Ukrainians are going to have to negotiate away some of that territory, that this spoken obligation that we are going to help Ukraine retake every last inch of their country, and including the Crimean Peninsula too, that no, they don't really mean that, man. And you know what? Again, who's the president? I don't really know, man. I mean, for Milley to come out and say this stuff publicly the way he did, it didn't seem like just a trial balloon for their new consensus. Honestly, it seemed like a faction fight. I mean, the way the New York Times portrayed it was like Blinken and Sullivan still don't want to. That's the Secretary of State National Security Advisor. They still want to fight. The Pentagon doesn't. The Pentagon thinks it's time to wrap this thing up, but the diplomat weenies want to keep the thing going. And so I don't know if like Biden's just napping or he's just, what? I mean, there has been some indications of diplomacy. The head of the CIA went and met the head of Russian intelligence in Ankara, Turkey last week. And they're meeting to continue the New START treaty, which is the last major outstanding treaty limiting thermonuclear weapons, strategic nuclear weapons. So they're not talking about the treaty, but they're talking about it, which is good enough for me, man. At least they're talking at all. And it seems to be something like the beginning of some negotiation here to try to find a reasonable conclusion to this thing. Because I think it makes no sense to think that the Russians can just do what they want and take what they want after what they've been through for the last 10 months here. While at the same time, I just don't think it's reasonable at all to think that the Ukrainians can drive them out either.
I think what's going to happen is we sent so much aid and so much weapons over there that at some point what they're going to say is, oh, there's a radical terrorist Nazi presence in Ukraine. Now we have to go back over there and
we're going to switch sides. Yeah, we got to ally with Russia to fight against the Nazis. Of course. It's just like the Afghanistan war, right? Yeah. Again, when Bush invaded Afghanistan, Vladimir Putin was like, I'm at your service. I'm happy to help. Why? Because we were switching sides in the war, not the Russians. We were taking the Russian side against our old friends, the Mujahideen.
Yeah.
So could that kind of thing happen again here? Absolutely. And in fact, I would like to point out that when the Russians were preparing to invade last December and January, the Americans were saying, good, we're going to turn Ukraine into Afghanistan. Remember how we did in the 1980s in Rambo 3 and we bled them and we helped bin Laden shoot down their helicopters? Yeah, ain't we clever? But man, they only just finished losing the war in Afghanistan in September of last year. It's only 3 months after losing the war that was fought against the consequences of backing the, enemy of my enemy in the 1980s, had only just finished. And they got the word Afghanistan back in their mouth as the model for how we want to move forward on this thing. It's just absolutely incredible, the lack of self-awareness of the people in charge of the policy in this country, man. Like, quite frankly, man, America's the world empire. This isn't to our benefit, and it's not to the benefit of any of the rest of the people in the world either. And we lost our republic in the name of dominating the rest of the planet Earth. I was watching season 2 of King of the Hill, and Dale Gribble was talking about, oh yeah, back in the days of black and white TV and democratically elected Congresses, right? Because we all know that the Congress is chosen by, first and foremost, the military industrial complex and the Israelis, and then whoever wants to line up after them to try to choose their congressman. I mean, that's who decides. It's not the people of this country. And that's the excuse for our FBI counterintelligence division. Again, back to Russiagate for a moment. Just consider for a moment, like in a vacuum, forget everything else you know, and just think about this for a minute. The FBI counterintelligence division and the CIA framed the major party candidate for president of the United States for treason. And then they kept it going for 3 years. And none of them were held accountable in any way. One lawyer got probation. One FBI lawyer got probation, and they got away with that. Like, who in the hell do they think they are? Who is the FBI counterintelligence division to frame the major party candidate for president of the United States? And the reality is, the reason for that is because we're not a republic. We're not a democracy. We're a corrupt, evil empire, a national security state dressed up as a constitutional republic. It's the military, the CIA, the State Department, their cronies, foreign states, again, like Israel and Saudi Arabia, who have all the leverage, and all those marble statues and all the rest of that stuff is all just the illusion for us, and that's why, the FBI agents in your email box, in your search box, in your phone's location data, right? Remember the Snowden leak? They know every bedroom you've been in for the last 5 years, every car you've ridden in, every public meeting you attended, and who all else was there with you too. They got all of that on you. They're saving it all. That's not a limited constitutional republic treating you that way. That's a corrupt, evil empire that's doing that. And if you ask anybody, man, we got to get rid of the Patriot Act, they'll say, don't you know there's a war on? The terrorists are going to come and get us. The Russians are going to come and get us. You want to dissolve the Department of Homeland Security, right, when they're the only thing standing between us and the Russians taking over our elections, right? When we didn't even have a Department of Homeland Security before, but we needed one because of the terrorism problem that Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan and George Bush and Bill Clinton had created for us. And so we had to give George Bush a Department of Homeland Security and a few wars and a couple of $10 trillion in order to protect us from the problem that they'd cause. And then on down the line, what did Obama do? All Obama did was pick up the consequences of Bush's policies and make them all 3 times worse, right? So...
you a fan of cryptocurrency?
Well, only kind of. I honestly, I think, look, as long as we have a fiat money system, then even gold is just going to be subject to bubbles and crashes and bubbles and crashes. If you want to hold it for the longest term, that's one thing. I think, and I'm not the expert on Bitcoins and shitcoins. I know there's a million of them, but I think that at least for most of them, their actual utility is limited. That what they're really good for is pump and dump schemes. They're really a pyramid scheme, but the whole world's invited, right? So it ain't Madoff, it's decentralized. And truthfully, every government central bank on this planet only knows how to do one thing: print money. So they're going to keep printing money, and then it keeps driving people into alternative currencies of one kind or another. But I think if you just look at the history of even Bitcoin itself, never mind all the others, that it's just boom and bust and boom and bust. And there's no stability in the Bitcoin because there's no stability in the dollar. And so there can't be, right? So it's always just going to be volatile as hell with, you know, some people buying low and selling high and getting very lucky, and other people making the opposite bet. I mean, I think, you know, my friend Mike Swanson goes, look, man, you spend the same amount of money on Bitcoin and then spend the same amount of money on stock. Like, even at the end of the day, after the crash, and there's a big correction coming and whatever, at least the stock is in a company that actually exists. What the hell is a Bitcoin? Unless you actually like really have a use for trading them back and forth. You have a business with other people where you pay people in Bitcoin and they pay you, and it really does work in everybody's interest in that way. I think essentially look at, even at the height of its success and everything, adoption is still very limited, right? Like, all the shopkeepers in your town are not taking Bitcoin. It's not replaced the dollar because it can't, right? As long as the dollar says this note is legal tender for paying your taxes and paying your debts, right? In other words, if you have a contract that says Scott Horton has to pay me in Bitcoin, and then we go to court and I say to the judge, well, I tried to pay him in US currency, but he only wants Bitcoin. The judge will side with me and tell you dollars will be good enough for you, Mr. Jesus. And then that'll be it, right? So as long as that's the case, that the government, you know, mandate on the dollar is there, then I think that it essentially skews the utility of Bitcoin. Like, if you had a world where you could get rid of the central bank and we all just had Bitcoin, at that point, then if it's the dollar, if it's the measure, then I think it could probably be a lot more stable. But right now, like, you know, if I buy something from you right now in Bitcoin, either I'm a damn fool or you are, right? Because it's about to go back up or it's about to go down, right? But it's hard to say that we're both smart if we're making the transaction. If right now it's trading at 16.3, dude, 16.4, like, man, that thing was worth $50,000. Maybe if I hold on to it a little bit longer, it'll be back up at 50, right? Why would I spend it now when it's crashed, right? Or, you know, whatever, and all the various interpretations of that. So I think, you know, I do support them, like, in the sense of, like, if anybody can get away with buying and selling anything without it ultimately, like, being on your IRS ledger, then great, right? Like, if you can use cryptocurrencies in a way where you never do cash it out for cash at your bank, but you just, like, are within an economic ecosystem where, like, everybody down at the farmer's market is just passing the same, you know, SHIB around every week or whatever. It goes around and around, and there's no accounting to a bank, no accounting to an IRS, no W-2 or any kind of thing. I'm for that. I hate the IRS. I mean, to me, the idea of having an income tax in what is ostensibly a capitalist society is the stupidest and craziest and just wrongest, most immoral and back-asswards thing that you could possibly do. It makes no sense at all. It's a capitalist society where you're in trouble for earning and succeeding. And the better you do, the more trouble you're in and the higher your fine. And the Fifth Amendment doesn't protect you. You have to confess to your crime of succeeding in buying and selling things and making a positive margin. Like, that is just, and it's a system of enslavement. As you know, they create so much money. Why they even needed taxes? It's mostly just, as the IRS is a symptom. It's a system of control. It's so that you have to not use cash. You have to use your card because you know they're coming for you, and you're going to have to account for every nickel and dime that came in and out. So you might as well keep it all on the card where they can see it all in real time too. You know what I mean? Like, man. And so, yeah, if anybody can use any shit coin that I've never even heard of before in my life to get away with buying and selling and buying and back and forth without ever having to come to account to the pigs, then hell yes, more power to you. I'm all for that. You know what I mean? But I do think it's regretful to think to see people though, because it's like an easy access thing, man. You don't have to know anything about stocks or any kind of thing. It's like kind of a fad. You just go on. It's really easy. You can buy some and whatever, and it's right when people are excited, everybody's buying high, right? And then they get completely served. And like I remember seeing on Reddit where people are saying, "Hey, man, so like I bought Bitcoin when it was worth this much, but like so it says in my account it's only worth that much now. So like, is there a way that I can get my money back or something?" And really, no, man, I'm sorry, no. So you have a lot of people who like are in no position to be speculating, who are speculating just because it's like easy access to do it. And of course, because at least up until the last, few months here, the artificially low interest rates are so low that you're a damn fool to try to have a savings account. And they might as well make a savings account illegal. If inflation is 8% and interest is nothing, what the hell? You can't sit there and save anything. You got to invest it in something. Find a bubble. Try to get in low and try to get out high. And, I'm an idiot. I don't necessarily always buy high. Like I sometimes buy low, but I never sell high. So I just keep holding and hodling forever and ever. But,
Not a bad thing.
yeah, the last 2 times it got up to 67,000, I was like, that's it. I'm selling everything. And then one of my friends told me, no, don't, dude. It's about to go up all the way to 80. I know it. And I was like, oh, okay. And then bam, down again. So I'm playing the long game on this Ponzi scheme. I think probably by the time I cash in my Bitcoins, it's going to have boomed and busted and pumped and dumped, 4 or 5 more times. But, by then, what little I have will be worth millions and all. But millions will only be worth thousands. So I'll be right back where I was.
See, you'll be back where you were anyway. I agree. Shout out to my super chatters, Brian Redact, that said, can't hang out tonight, but pay my dues. Fool's Errand changed my life, and Hotep's been told you changed my Thursdays. I appreciate you both. Appreciate you, man.
Feel it, man.
Art Dog, you said, I love my conservative people, but when I hear true libertarians speak, it's music to my ears. Oh, yeah. Forest Mommy. What up, Forest Mommy? She said, what a mashup.
Hi.
Thank you to you both. Scott is an expert on all things war in America. Yes, he is. Common Cure. Show me proof that the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and I'll turn libertarian tomorrow morning.
Well, I don't have proof of that, but I surely could tell you the Americans, the Brits, the Poles were the only ones with the motive to do that. It sure as hell was not Russia. The Russians, all they got to do is turn it off at the source.
Yeah.
If they want to jerk the Germans' chain, they got to switch, man. That's easy. Blow up your own pipeline. It was almost certainly. I could think the rumors are now that it was the Brits. I believe it.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, I'll tell you what. This is not the solid proof that you need. Maybe you won't be a libertarian until tomorrow afternoon, but go to the Gray Zone, and they have a source somewhere. They got a great source in British intelligence who keeps squealing to them. And they have something about, I didn't read the whole thing, but they got something that just came out in the last week or two about a previous British plan to blow up Nord Stream.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know if this was the exact plan, but probably.
Chad Lemoyne, what up, Chad? That's my libertarian guy right there. He said, so glad this mashup happened. No better authority on the empire than Scott Horton, and H.A.'s a perfect inquisitive mind to probe Scott's expertise. Appreciate you, bro. Inside the ages, if we reject the mainstream media in elections, does a third party, Dave Smith, have a chance if we go 100% alt tech? The net impact is underestimated.
Well, look, I got a daydream about how great the next Libertarian Party candidacy could be, for sure. And look at who we're up against, man. DeSantis, if he's the nominee, again, he's just horrible. And our guy can praise him on COVID and then turn around and destroy him because there's basically nothing else redeemable about the guy.
Damn.
If it's Trump, Trump is getting just so old and just so crazy, and he already really only cares about himself and can pretty much only talk about himself. And I think 2 years from now, a year and a half from now, like he's just going to be a wreck, dude. So I don't even know if he'll get the nomination. I guess my bet is on him. My money's on Trump for now for getting the Republican nomination. That could change, but I think he will be a weaker candidate than he was in 16 or 20. And then the Democrats are just, oh my God, are they so screwed? I mean, their incumbent is so out of it. I mean, man, the idea that he's going to stand for election 2 years from now, I mean, I guess it's possible. I know he wants to, but I really could see his wife stepping in and saying, Joe, you had your chance. You're not going to be able to beat him this time. Whatever. We need to get somebody young in there. I don't know. See, but then they got a real problem with Kamala Harris because she's the first female and first woman of color, two different colors, to be the vice president. And so for the Democratic Party to throw her out for a white guy like Gavin Newsom is just, I mean, I could see them doing it, but oh my God, the earthquake that's going to cause in terms of wokeness and all that. Although I don't know if anybody really likes Kamala Harris.
No.
Like identity only goes so far. And she's just such a dingbat and kind of a, I don't want to say mean-spirited person, but she's just so disingenuous. You know what I mean? You just look at her and she don't mean that smile. You never believe her smile ever, you know? So like, and she's just such a dummy. You know, the future is the future. And that's why we call it that, because it hasn't happened yet. Like, yeah, okay, lady. Like she could teach elementary school kids, I guess, you know?
Right.
But be the president. So, but and look, Gavin Newsom. They're talking about Gavin Newsom is their star. Gavin Newsom is the guy who chased 750,000 people net out of California. It's the first time they had a net population reduction since the Spanish stole it from the Indians in the 1500s, dude. There has been a nothing but net increase of people to California this whole time until the year 2020 under that guy. And who broke every single one of his own restrictions and who like got his start in politics. I don't want to get my anecdote wrong. I know he was the guy who went and got drugs for the I can't remember who it was that he was protecting, that he was the guy who always went to get their drugs for him. Anyway, but he's just like a pet. Damn it, I need to get my anecdote right. He's just a pet of powerful people. He's nobody special whatsoever. Like he's somewhat good looking, has his hairline where it's still supposed to be or whatever. Like that's what they're going for. That's all they got. That's all they got. And then in the middle of a massive financial crisis, in the middle of a massive foreign policy crisis all around the world, Middle East, Eastern Europe, Pacific, and where faith in our institutions is just through the floor. It's just dead. And everyone hates the Republicans and the Democrats. No one trusts them. No one believes in them. And I think with a guy like Dave Smith as the candidate who understands economics and who has a great stage presence, you know, as a professional stand-up comedian and all of that. Like I've seen him give speeches a few times live. I mean, I've seen him on video too, but I've seen him give his speeches where he doesn't even have notes, much less like a speech written, because he's a stand-up, right? Like his brain works in a way where his outline is solid. Like he doesn't miss a beat. He knows exactly what he wants to say. And he gets up there and he just kills. He just kills. So to have a guy with that kind of talent and that kind of background knowledge and tall, dark, and handsome and all that, like he is, speaking of hairlines in the right place where it's supposed to be still, unlike me, I think that Dave Smith could absolutely be a force to be reckoned with. And does he have a chance to win the presidency? No. Does he have a chance to dominate the political conversation in 2024? Yeah. Does he have a chance to do a Ron Paul revolution style massive upheaval in American politics? Absolutely. I got a cough. Hang on.
Shout out Dave Smith, man.
Sorry. But I absolutely believe in him, man. And I think that, I think it's what America needs so bad. You know, it's just, you look at, why did people love Ron Paul so much? You know, like, obviously he's very charming in the sense of like, he's such a humble old little country doctor. You just want to hug him and all that kind of thing. Right. But like what he's not, it's like that. In fact, even though he actually is like 6'1", they make him look little and he kind of just stoops like a little guy anyway, or whatever. Like, but but he's not like big square jawed like alpha dog. You know, he's a doctor, not a lawyer, right? He's like a kind, decent gentleman, right? He's a nice guy. Like, how could a guy like that? He's unassuming. You know, he's got almost like an anti-charisma. And I don't mean that in a way like as a negative, like kind of thing. Like, again, he's very, very decent. You can tell that. But he's not like walks into a room and like Bill Clinton goes in and just shakes everybody's hands with 2 hands. And he looks them in the eye for exactly 3.5 seconds and he makes them all swoon. And then he goes to whatever. Like Ron Paul doesn't have those kind of like artificial sort of leadership skills, right? He just says the truth. He just gets out there and is like, even if he stumbles and has to restart his sentence two or three times, he goes, but that's not right, because we know that it's supposed to be like this and not like that. And we know that they said this, but it was really that, and whatever it is. And then he took, you know, our libertarian movement was like 1 guy in every neighborhood in the country. And then he made it 20 guys in every neighborhood. And, you know, in 1 year. He essentially made it, you know, he made tens of millions of new libertarians. And essentially just showed people by example, like, oh, you don't have to believe that stuff. And then people would look at his voting record and go, wow, man, this guy evidently believes the things that he says and says the things he believes. I mean, think about the Giuliani moment. We just characterized it now, the Giuliani moment. Remember, the Giuliani moment was him telling Rudy Giuliani, the bully, and the American Republican Party of George W. Bush in the year 2007, a year and a half before the election still, that the reason al-Qaeda attacked us is because we were bombing Iraq from bases in Saudi Arabia. Simple as that. And Giuliani says, how dare you? You take that back. How could you say that America deserved it? And he goes, look. Of course, he didn't say that. And I think Wendell Goler, the Fox News guy, also mischaracterized it. Oh, you're saying we invited the attack? Which, like, well, invited, that's a pretty weird way to put it, right? Because you could imply deliberately, but that's clearly not what Ron meant by invited. You know what I mean? But just provoked is what he was saying.
Right.
But Ron does not say sorry, does not back down. He says the CIA coined the term blowback. It means consequences of things that the CIA does, man. Like, this is, you know, consequences of American foreign policy. And it's just true. Haven't you read why they said that they were doing it? You don't know about the motives of our enemies here. And of course, now they say they're glad that we're over in Iraq because our guys are within their rifle range. They can bleed us and bankrupt us easier by way of the policy that we're doing. We're helping our enemies. Like, come on, man. That's a pretty damn bitter pill to swallow for a Republican to tell a room full of Republicans, you know, like, and he didn't even blame Bill Clinton. He just said, we've been bombing Iraq for 10 years. Maybe if he had said, come on, Bill Clinton provoked that attack, that would have been like a little easier for them to swallow or something like that. But he didn't say it that way. Right. And people just knew that it was true. And even though they hated the truth of it, they were like won over by him. They were won over to him simply because this old man cares enough about me to tell me the truth. Even when he obviously has got to know that that's the kind of truth that might really piss me off. I might not want to hear that at all. You tell me you're running for president of the United States and you're running on Bin Laden kind of had a point? Like, are you kidding me? Right? But the reality, people knew that that was true. Yeah. They knew that it was true. And they knew that he wasn't rationalizing and explaining away or justifying what Bin Laden did. He was saying it's the fact. We were bombing Iraq from bases in Saudi for 10 years before they hit us on September 11th. Then we did the full-scale invasion. And the thing is, like, because people know, like, I do remember Bill Clinton bombing Iraq all the time. Like, I remember the 90s. Like, even if you were a teenager in the 90s, you know Bill Clinton. There was the Outkast song, Bombs Over Baghdad. That wasn't about 1991. That was about the 90s, right? Or, like, that was a Clinton era thing, you know? It was part of the public consciousness. People knew that that was right. But it was this entire kind of category of discussion that had been closed off from them. And as soon as they heard Ron Paul say it, they were, attracted to that because of just how damn true it was, no matter how ugly of a truth that it was. And I think that really goes to show, right, that despite all the hype and despite how childish people can be and how easily manipulated people can be and all that kind of thing too, that if you really give them a fair shot to know what's true and to make a judgment call on what they really think is right, and most people are good people and would do the right thing and make the right choice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very forgiving of right-wingers who are right-wingers because they hate the left so much they think I got to be a right-winger, because I definitely ain't that. And then I feel the same way about left-wingers and liberals too, who are like, they know that whatever they are, they sure as hell are not a right-winger, so they must be on the left. And then by joining up with one side or the other, yes, that means that they become really bad on lots of things, right? But it means that essentially almost always their heart is in the right place. So what they want is what's best for their society, for their country, for their community. And they think the other guys are worse. And in fact, most people don't like the Republicans or the Democrats at all, but they hate the other guys more. So they'll vote. In fact, I voted Libertarian, but anywhere there wasn't a Libertarian, I voted Republican this time, which I never do. But oh my God, I hate the Democrats so much. I want to watch them burn. I want to smell them burn. I hate them.
Jesus Christ.
So, yeah, but that's the same as everybody voted Republican too.
Yeah.
We got to keep the Democrats out. That's all. And
Yeah.
then the same thing on the other side too, right? The same thing on the other side. It's not so much a vote of endorsement for what these guys are doing, but geez, you don't want to invite those guys back in, do you? And so that's the way we're stuck. But so then again, I just think this is just what a wonderful wide open field for a candidate from the Libertarian Party who actually has his act together, knows what he's talking about, and wants to squabble. You know what I mean? Like, for all of their flaws and whatever, like just objectively kind of speaking in political terms, not in my own terms, but in terms of like the country, W. Bush and Gore were like strong candidates, vice president, senator versus second-term governor, son of a president, surrounded by Colin Powell and Dick Cheney and all these wonderful, reliable guys. And like, there was something for people to believe in there, I guess, where people were like, there was a little bit more of I like this guy or I like this guy. But even then, it was mostly I hate the other guy more. And I don't really like W. Bush, but I got to keep Al Gore out, and vice versa, right? But since then, we have, and I guess Barack Obama was a strong candidate too. He had a hell of a lot of charisma in 08 and 12. I'll give him that. But the rest of all the candidates on all sides have just been absolutely pathetic. Right?
Yeah.
They're all, Joe Biden and John McCain and Mitt Romney and Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden himself, the Irish state Biden. These people are just weak. They're just like wide open to be taken out by just, if we have our act together the way that we can do like a Ron Paul revolution, get the message out there in a way that just leaves them standing naked and embarrassed, like I can see it so easily. Kamala Harris going blah, blah, blah at some town hall, but they don't want to hear it. And the audience is saying to her, no, but that comedian Smith guy keeps saying this. What about that? Right? Like, cause I know that we can get him famous enough, important enough that people can hear what he's saying. People are going to remember what he said. I mean, look at his first Giuliani moment has already happened, going on Rogan and talking about Ukraine. In fact, he got like 4 million views on his Yemen bit. The one before that, he did one on Yemen, and people don't even know we're at war in Yemen. This is the first time they were even hearing about it, and they care. He made them care about it. And the people in the comments, how like YouTube comments, like the lowest form of communication in human history or whatever. Like the YouTube comments under that Yemen bit, people are like, oh my God, I had no idea. This is an absolute outrage. Where can I learn more about this? I know what this man is telling me is true. And I know that this is wrong. And I want to get involved. What do I do? Point me in a direction. They were pissed to find out for the very first time that this has been going on. So, so that's his first two, right? Yemen and Ukraine, the two worst things in the world going on right now, and America's role in making them that way. And he's already, at 7 and 4 million views, or 3, maybe 7 and 3, maybe. on those 2 videos. That's just right there to me is just scratches the surface to just show you the potential that we have here.
Yeah, it's all about
Get out
reach.
there and tell the truth, man.
It's all about reach. David Zientara says Scott Horton rules. Yeah, he does, man. Inside the Asia said Dave Smith, Roseanne Barr, 2024, my wet dream. I love
That's
that.
funny.
I
Boy,
love
we'd
that.
have to like get her a shot collar or something.
Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Horton's links are in the description box below, scotthorton.org/books. You can go get his books. I've read Fool's Errand and the other one, the second book. Enough already. Yeah, I've read both of those. Those are really good. And you got a new one coming out, right?
Yeah, I got a new one right here over my shoulder. Hotter Than the Sun. Time to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And that's a collection of interviews that I did, but don't let that turn you off. It's really good. And it's all aspects of nuclear weapons. The major powers and the rogue states and Hiroshima and Nagasaki and all about it's really good. And then I'm working right now on are you aware of the podcaster Martyr Made, Daryl Cooper? Well, you'd love him, man. I know. You sign up for his podcast. It's so good, dude.
Okay.
I mean, the guy is just brilliant. And me and him are working together on a book. It's going to be called Provoked: America's Role in the Russia-Ukraine War.
Yeah, I want to read that one.
Yeah, it's going to be good, man.
When's that coming out?
You're gonna have to give me a few months still.
Okay, all right, take your time.
It's gonna be like the fool's errand of this story. Like the chapters are H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, W. Bush, etc. Right, so it goes all the way back to the end of the Cold War, and I think I'm probably really overdoing it on my research right now, and the amount of everything that I've collected that I want to put in there, I know is not gonna go.
I know what that's like.
There's going to be a point where I'm going to have to get that hatchet out and start cutting things out. But right now, there's so much research going into it, and I'm just learning so much too. It's just crazy. But before I can really finally get it all integrated into the damn thing and published, man, I don't know. I'm so far behind. I really am, man. It's going to be months.
It's hard. I wrote the Patriot Report. It was the hardest thing I ever did.
Yeah, it sucks, man. I promised myself I would never do this again, and then I just keep doing it. It's terrible.
Yeah, research papers are really hard.
Yeah, man.
Because you have to,
that's how my books are. Just fact, and then moral condemnation. It's like the Noam Chomsky model. Fact. This guy's a criminal. Fact. These men belong in prison. Fact. This is the worst thing that ever happened. And and this one is, well, I have a separate page of notes that itself is like 200 pages right now. It's just notes.
Yeah. I organize my stuff in Airtable.
Oh, I don't know about that.
It's a piece of software. I had it Kanban style, and then Kanban style. So it'd be like, let's say I covered, Second Bank of the United States, and then under that would have different cards. So then, I was trying to organize each whole thoughts, and you open up that card, it'd have a whole bunch of notes in there with sources and links, and you go to the next card. So I did mine Kanban style. Oh, that's cool. So it's sort of like a built-in outline as you research it, kind of. Yeah, mine's a damn mess. Mine is just all over the place. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to, because I have the actual book of everything that's written so far has hundreds of 100 pages of notes after that, maybe 2. And then I have this separate page of notes. And eventually what's going to have to happen is I'm just going to go through all of those notes one at a time, try to find where in the text it goes, just paste the note in there, get all of it in, and then go through and read it and try to integrate it all in well and edit it, cut it, and whatever. And try to move to a cabin in the woods with everything I've got right now and just cut out all other influences and distractions. Well, that's what I did when I wrote the Patriot Report. I literally, I was in research mode, like you said, taking notes and moving stuff. But when time to write the book, I literally just stopped streaming. I stopped everything. It was from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. then stop, take a break, then back to it for months on end. Yep. That's the only way you can really knock it out. You kind of got to get in that zone. Is, and I just got too many jobs right now, man. You got 101 jobs. You're What are you, king of the Libertarian Institute or something like that?
Yeah, king. I should change my official title to king of the institute. And I am wrapped up in this all this Libertarian Party stuff. I mean, that's something that when I wrote the other two books, well, a little bit of Fool's Errand, a little bit on Enough Already, but like when I wrote Fool's Errand, I didn't have all this Libertarian Party stuff to do, all these speeches to give, and all this traveling and all of this stuff that I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So I'm really trying to put all of that off. I'm kicking all those cans down the road. I'm not doing any more events really through, certainly not through the end of the year. And then even like into the spring, I'm trying to not make any plans. And then like the show, I really have done this ever since I started writing Fool's Errand. And the show I do like only on Mondays and Fridays. And I think now I'm going to make it where it's going to be just Fridays only. So I'm just going to not, and then sometimes I'll do like 10 interviews in one day on a Friday and just knock them all out, and then hopefully get back to the rest of the week and just do nothing but work on the book. Right. And then I have a really great team at the Institute, and I told them, like, you guys got to pick up my slack because I can't do all of this stuff at once. And if I'm going to focus on this book, y'all got to make the Institute great, and take the lead on publicizing it and the rest. And they are doing a great job. Keith Knight and all the guys are really doing great in pushing the Institute. But then, yeah, that is the problem, man. And, I got a family and a million obligations, so it's tough, but,
keep going, man. You got our support over here. Mike Can said, thank you for the dedication you bring to your work, good sirs. No doubt.
Thanks, man.
But yeah, you got our support over here. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Horton.
Thanks, dudes.
To hear the audio version of this, go to hotepjesus.com/podcast. Subscribe to your favorite platform, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, and you'll find that there. And this wonderful, sharp conversation with Scott Horton will be there in the coming days. Hotep and Bill.